Hello and welcome to Access Chat. I'm delighted that we're joined today by Maria Ferraro, who is the CFO of Siemens Energy and also the leader for diversity. So it's great to have you with us today. Antonio and I constantly talk about our backstory with our former employer. So it's really nice to have people that are part of our history with us today and talk about the future rather than the past. Also need to say that Debra is unfortunately not with us because we're doing this off schedule, and so she's busy elsewhere. But thank you and welcome, Maria. You're a Canadian living in Germany.
Yes.
How did that happen?
Well, first of all, thank you, Neil and Antonio, for having me. I know, as you said, Neil, it's off schedule, so we're going to bring the energy to the conversation. And yes, I am Canadian, born and raised, and of Italian descent. So I always had a multicultural view, if you'd like, in my household. Was brought up with a very strong Italian culture, but of course, anyone, and Neil, we just talked about how you loved your visit to Canada before, let's say, where travel was constrained. I mean, Canada is rich in culture, and I grew up with a multitude of people from all over the world, and that's all I knew. So yes, my time in Canada, and Canada still is in my heart home. I've been, before taking a pit stop, let's say, where I was in the UK for 3 years, I've now been living here in Germany with my family. And what brought me here was, kind of a little bit of a boring tale, right? A lot of great career opportunities that was afforded to me with with Siemens AG. And then, of course, since May of last year, I had the absolute privilege and honor to come over to Siemens Energy to be the chief financial officer. This is an independent spun-off part of Siemens AG. And what I took with me, because I was the chief diversity officer at that time of Siemens AG, and now I absolutely am thrilled to be the chief inclusion and diversity officer of Siemens Energy. And again, I think, Neil, why it's so important to me is maybe my upbringing, and also part of that, let's say, sensitivity to the multicultural environment that I'm so used to. And yeah, so that's how it happened. Yeah, I'm here for work and I'm loving it.
Great. And so I think Antonio's next up with a question.
Now in Germany, and before in UK and Canada, but you're working in technology. So
yes,
what brought you here?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, technology as such, yes, I'm working in technology, and this was, of course, an integral part of technology and innovation. I think it's important, you always talk about both. And it's exactly what Neil was mentioning earlier. It's about looking forward. I'm fascinated. And, this is what, our, let's say, purpose was in Siemens AG. And I've taken that here, even with the purpose of Siemens Energy, is, we're solving the world's problems. We're ensuring that technology is there, that's helping us along the way, because we all know this is a massive enabler, right? And that's why I think it was always important to me to be part of these types of organizations, and hence why I've been with Siemens and the Siemens family. I can't believe it, already 16 years. So it's to me really, really important. And Antonio, you and I met a few years back, and I remember at the time why I also think it's so important is it's absolutely imperative that we continue to focus on diversity and inclusion in science and technology, engineering and maths, STEM. It's so important. It's something that comes from my heart as a mother of a daughter, to ensure that we continue to encourage and I hope one day it's not even about encouragement anymore. It's just that anyone who has the skill and the will can go into, technology and engineering or into STEM subjects and STEM areas. And I think this is why it's so important for us to have more role modeling and more women in science and technology. This is something I'm also personally passionate about. So it was a great tie-in, if you'd like, solving, the world's problems, using technology and innovation, making sure that we have an inclusive and diverse influence, not only internally in the organization, but also externally. This is what, drives me personally.
Excellent. So a lot of your diversity initiatives, you talked about inclusion, but when we define inclusion, for me, for us in general, we define inclusion as having disability as part of that. Why is it so important for organizations of scale like Siemens Energy to recognize and support full inclusion as opposed to sort of segregated diversity initiatives?
Yeah, it's a really good point, because if you noticed, I stressed the fact that I'm CIDO now, so that I needs to be so firmly embedded when it comes to looking at diversity initiatives. An excellent colleague of Sarah and I's always says diversity is a fact, inclusion is a choice. And I think this goes to it. Or someone once said to me, it's whether you're invited to the party, but whether you're asked to actually dance. And I think this is some of the differences why it's not just about diversity, it is about inclusion. It is about creating an environment where everyone feels valued, respected, appreciated, and welcome. And this is where one of the main tenets of what we're doing with inclusion and diversity at Siemens Energy is this concept of, this feeling of belonging. And that's why, to me, it's really about the fact that diversity is a fact, inclusion is a choice, and how do we ensure that everybody feels like they have a place in our organization? Because only then, the real value of having the different perspectives. We just talked about technology, that innovation power. If everybody is from the same school, does the same background, how are we really looking at ensuring that we have technology that addresses all the needs? This, to me, it goes hand in hand. So hence why it really is about, ensuring inclusion is part of the agenda, not just diversity.
Great. And let's face it, in organizations of the size of Siemens Energy or the size of Atos, where your presence spans across the globe,
correct,
you are diverse already by default, because you've got people from all kinds of different countries and backgrounds and races and ethnicities and religions and all of this. It's that conscious effort to be inclusive, because you've already got the diversity piece covered just through scale.
No, absolutely. You're so right. I mean, we're 90,000 strong in Siemens Energy, 90,000 people globally, and we operate in over 90 countries. So you're so right. And what a shame it would be if we were unable to tap into that power of that diversity by not or by ensuring, rather, let's keep it positive, by ensuring there's an inclusive environment. So you're right, absolutely. And I think large companies have to see this as, and we certainly see this as, an advantage of ours, that we do have that diversity already embedded in our global network of employees.
So on top of that, I mean, obviously you do a lot of stuff in the field as well. So what are some of the challenges that you're facing around disability, trying to be inclusive in a non-office environment? Because it's easy for me to say, oh yeah, we can be inclusive, we can throw technology at stuff, right? But you're doing big engineering projects, so the challenges that you face around inclusion are different from, say, sort of, how do we define a traditional tech company, if you like? The ones where people are home based or home office based, or are really sort of just doing programming. So what are the sort of things that you could think of that are both a help and some of the challenges there?
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. I mean, those 90,000 people globally are in a mixture of environments, right? So they're in office environments, they're in manufacturing environments. Don't forget, we're also on project sites and so on. So that complexity for sure, Neil, is embedded in our organization. But, just taking it a step back, how do we ensure that we're not only tapping into the power of all of those individuals around the world, like I said, but ensuring that they're able to, from a disability perspective, are able to work as effectively as we would and they would expect to at a company like ours. And I think maybe just to take a step back, we cannot, we cannot talk about diversity or inclusion without including or, focusing on disability, or ability. And at Siemens Energy, maybe to frame it, and Sarah was talking about this earlier when it was just the four of us, we're looking at four main networks within the company: gender, LGBTQIA+, ethnicity, and disability. And the reason why we've created these networks, Neil, is exactly for the reason that you're saying. We have a very complex environment within our company. And who better to tell us what needs they have, or what challenges and or opportunities that we have, than our employees. So now we've set these networks in place, and those individuals are, from all over the company in the different environments that we talked about, so that we can learn firsthand on what we're doing well, on things, and I think with a company the size and scale of ours, that's also important to know what are we doing well so we can replicate that and, have these best practices shared. But more important, or just as important, is, understanding where we still have work to do. And we still have work to do here. And I think ensuring that we're leveling the playing field so that everybody has an equal opportunity in terms of disability, I think it is key. Even looking at health and safety, right? And in ensuring that that's present on the project sites for people of all abilities, ensuring that you can access, our buildings, access our sites. I have a personal wish here because, personally, I have been impacted, in my family with somebody who has a disability. And in terms of this is accessibility. So, it changes how you look at things, you see it through a lens. And that's why these networks are so important, because they're the lens that we need to see how to address the areas that they see are concerned within our company. And I have to say, my personal issues with my close family member who, like I said, has late onset adult muscular dystrophy. And it just changes, like I said, it changes your lens. And we take things for granted. So we have to keep these communication lines open, and we must ensure that we're sharing experiences, because what we also said is, it's, if what we see as a fix for something may not be a fix. So I think we need to walk the talk. We need to be having these dialogues with our networks. We're making them a part of the solutions that we're embedding. And I think this is a bit of a different, not radical, but a very different approach. And I'm really proud about it, about what we're doing here.
We often observe diversity and inclusion initiatives from different organizations, and sometimes we see them being very centered. Someone is doing something at the head office, and then employees who are in other countries, they feel, it will be so wonderful if they were doing that here. How can you make sure that we reach everyone and we don't create that feeling of disappointment from someone that is in a country that is not as privileged as Germany or Canada?
Yeah, Antonio, fantastic question. And again, back to Neil's point, for a company like ours, operating in greater than 90 countries, I mean, you're absolutely right. If you stratify even the technological maturity of these countries, you're going to have differences. You're so right. And that's why it's also important, and this is what we did with the group around me, maybe to take a step back. So what we did here at Siemens Energy is we took in place an I&D council. And Antonio, why we did that is because I didn't want, even if I'm a Canadian living in Germany, I did not want that we are sitting here in Munich or in Berlin or wherever we are and saying, this is how we see the solutions to the I&D area, or not even the solutions, even the program essentials. I said, no. And with the team, we wanted to ensure that we had representation, that global representation. What does that mean? Different countries, different areas, different disciplines. And so therefore we made this global I&D council. And I can tell you it truly is global. And then what we wanted to ensure is that's kind of replicated into those countries in let's say the first 20 countries or however many countries that we're looking at, that they also have an I&D council there. And why did we do that? Essentially to ensure that we're not going down that path. And it is a trap. And let's also be honest, Antonio, some of those programs are fantastic programs. The intentions are great, right? But it's just doing it from one perspective and not necessarily taking the essential necessities of the program from that country. And I always use Canada versus Germany as an example. In Germany, we do have different issues, even from a gender equality perspective. And maybe in Canada, I don't necessarily need a program on ethnicity, for example, where I remember in my, when I started my career there many years ago, I had over 30, imagine, in a team of 90, I had over 30 different cultures and backgrounds or ethnicities in my team. So maybe we don't need to focus there. And that's why we wanted to ensure we had this council in place. So you had this bottom-up communication, as well as ensuring that, let's say, the frame of what we want I&D to stand for, like I said earlier, the sense of belonging, equality, opportunity, that kind of creates the frame for the entirety of the program. So that's the way we're trying to address it, Antonio, to ensure that we have the voices from the various countries, that we're able to, let's say, fine tune and or customize for those individual needs. And more importantly, and this is what I did not want us to do, there has been tremendous work in progress in all of the various countries. When we were part of Siemens AG, of course, we had really great things going on already. At the pace, perhaps maybe not as fast as we wanted, but certainly addressing the individual needs of those countries and networks. And I did not want to say, okay, everybody stop. That would be the wrong thing to do. So that's why we want to, create a framework, make sure that the councils are in place, and that we have this dialogue upwards and downwards, and then coupling that with those networks that we're forming in those 4 areas that I mentioned earlier. That's truly trying to get a comprehensive understanding of what needs to be done for I&D within our company.
Great, thank you. So building on top of that, I mean, you've already talked about your motivation and why you're an ally.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that's really important, by the way. And thank you for that, because it's often goes unspoken. Yeah. And one of the things that we're always trying to encourage is people to have these open conversations about why it's important and why it's personal. Right. Because for the most part it is. And by the time you take the 1.3 billion people in the world and you attach friends and family members, it's home, and it's pretty quickly everybody's issue. Mm-hmm. But you've just talked also about the bottom-up approach of the networks, which is also really important because you're keeping it real. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, there is something to be said about executive engagement and executive allyship, and it's great that you just talked about it. How can we really make sure that it is on the board agenda, and that engagement at board level really percolates down through organizations? Because quite often it is talked about by the boards, but people don't see it. And one of the things that came out in the research done by Valuable 500 was that out of the CEOs in the FTSE, by the way, there are no CEOs in the FTSE 100 that have a disability or are out about having a disability. And of the CEOs that responded to their survey, those that said they had a disability, only 40% of those actually were open about their disability with their colleagues. So how can we change the culture where leadership can send a signal to the rest of the organization that this is not something shameful, that you know, disability is part of the thread in the fabric of society and life, and that it's something that we value because your experience of solving the problems that come through impairment also give you the perspectives that you need as a company to innovate. So how can you, as a change leader in your organization, how could your peers in other organizations change or facilitate that change? Because you're doing it by speaking now, but what else do you need to do?
No, I mean, Neil, it's absolutely about the not only tone from the top. I don't like that. I don't like when people say it needs to be tone from the top. No, it needs to be more. It needs to be we walk the talk. And I think, you know, I've indicated how we're trying to do that in terms of our engagement with the networks. And one thing that became clear is two things. One is, I think from even a leadership perspective, you know, we have a lot of great things ongoing. We have a lot of leaders who are allies. We have people that are fantastic allies all over the company. And then we also had the question of how can I do more? How can we do more? And what was great was we decided that allyship is the way we would like to take this to the next level. And this is something that I, you know, even though, and I say this all the time, even though I'm the CIDO of this company, I can tell you that I had 100% support from, you know, all the way from my board colleagues to the next level of leadership. And what we wanted to do, because you're so right, Neil, you know, if I'm honest with myself, like I said, you know, the person who has that disability is extremely close in my small family. You know, if that didn't happen to me, would I have been as sensitive? Would it have been as personal? Because, you know, it's at least for our family, it was completely disruptive. It was completely heart-wrenching what happened. And how quick things change from one day to the next. Yes. So this also was part of the allyship, you know, campaign, if you'd like, or how we wanted to launch that in our company, which was let's talk to our employees. Let's talk to our employees that have how allyship has played a real important part in their lives and how it has impacted them in our place of work. And I have to say, it was an amazing idea of the amazing individuals and team to do this. And it was quite an interesting concept, right? Because it was really going down all over. So Neil, to your point, all over the world, you know, looking at our employees and saying, hey, how did allyship change, you know, whether it was in any area, by the way, LGBTQIA+, or was it ethnicity, disability? And we explored that. And it was incredible. And I have never seen within, at least in my experience, and I'm not saying that because it is our company, I'm really being honest here. I've never seen such an outpouring of emotion, of then support, you know, from one of our employees in Brazil having Down syndrome and having, you know, their ally there with them to kind of take them along the way, or for someone coming out as transgender and how that impacted them and the ally that supported them through their process, to someone who lost, you know, the ability, their legs at the age of 18. And how did that, you know, how did their ally say, hey, you know, let's work through this together and kind of fight, you know, the discrimination, if any. And these stories were shared so raw, so honestly with the group. And I think had the impact that even I was overwhelmed with how great it went, in the sense that the acknowledgement of what being an ally is, the acknowledgement that anybody can be an ally, and the acknowledgement that, you know, at the end of the day, we as human beings, you know, forget that you're an employee of a certain company. We as human beings have to support each other and have to be there for one another. And I think this allyship has our full support. Our board is behind it. And we see this, and Sarah Hashish, who's there, who's part of this, I always tell her, this is going to be a movement. And I feel like it's a movement here because it's so personal and it's so right in being anybody. All of our 90,000 employees can be an ally, and why not?
So, with all that energy, it's very interesting to observe how it went. But it's also interesting I'm very curious to see your take and see how can Siemens Energy, as partners, customers, employees, how do you see that energy going outside the organization? It could be about, how can that reflect in the way how Siemens Energy creates products and how Siemens Energy might influence their own procurement and suppliers? How do you see that movement evolving?
Yeah, and Antonio, you're also bringing up an amazing point, because the influence is not only within the four walls of our offices or facilities and so on. How can we use that influence? And we are absolutely looking into that. But I would say, Antonio, this is more, let's say, at the beginning of the journey, right? And of course, ensuring that our products are being, are able to be used by anyone and so on. This has always been part of our design, if you'd like. But this ability to, or not this ability, I don't want to misuse the word, this, let's say, purpose to ensure that we're including that focus also on our ability to influence our supply chain, and also going forward into our offerings into the customer, into our customers is something that we need to continue to drive. And I think, to be frank, I know on the supply chain, we're already doing that in terms of even, ESG and responsibility and so on. But, we can certainly continue to drive that. I see that as the next step. But again, this allyship and the fact that this is the way we're going to approach this in Siemens Energy means, like I said, that it goes beyond our walls. Some of the stories, by the way, that the employees showed, who their allies were, had nothing to do with an employee of Siemens Energy. But I think it's important to say that, it intermingles into one's life, right? Because it's not something that goes away or changes after you leave the office or production facilities grounds. So I think it's absolutely something that has an external component to it as well.
Right.
I think it's it's particularly important that employees are able to share those stories.
Yes.
Because I think the fact that you are able to arrive at work and that's you.
Yes.
So you don't bring that weight. I need to hide my part of myself. I think that's very, very, very important. I think it makes people more productive, more open at work. I think it's a key element that organizations need to pursue and need to make happen internally.
Absolutely, Antonio. And I have to say the reaction that I'm talking about is exactly that. The ability for people and everyone who participated, but also those that have now kind of joined the movement, if you'd like, are in awe. I mean it, really in awe of our employees that are sharing their stories. And I think it creates a tone. Now here I'm using the tone, but it creates this acceptance within the organization to say, so what? I mean, let's go, let's work together, let's do what we have to do. And I know that one of my colleagues said that about, Canada versus, how does Canada fully accepts individuals, right? It's not just tolerating. And this is what we're trying to say through this allyship. It's like, absolutely, you have a place with us, you belong. And that feeling of belonging, I think, is a huge part of what we're trying to achieve with the allyship component of I&D at Siemens Energy.
Great. And we started what we call the Access Chat community because we are community builders. We wish to bring people together.
Yes.
And we've used social networks to have an inside-out approach. I think coming back to one of the things you said about ESG, because it's part of the world that I live in too, and the fact that you're Siemens Energy and we're looking at things like decarbonisation, we're actually, I a while back latched onto the idea that inaccessibility is actually an externality in the same way that pollution is. So we're treating exclusion like pollution. Yeah. And we've actually built our accessibility programs within our organization now along the same kind of structures so that you can treat the externalities, so that you can also do the internal, external. You can do the scope 1, 2, and 3 for your supply chain, for inclusion and diversity and all of these things too. So, and the reason we did this was because it was already a concept that business understood. Mm-hmm. And people also understand the idea that pollution is bad, and that if exclusion is like pollution, then maybe we shouldn't be doing it. Maybe we should be including people, embracing people, right? So it's not about tolerance, as you say. It is about embracing a community. So great that that's happening, and the allyship is super important, because that's an area where we also found value. We actually have an allies network, which is like a network of networks for people that support each other. So I think that's absolutely, creating that culture where people are able to reach out to each other, get that mutuality of support, and it is really affirmative and changes how you do business, how people perceive your organization as well. So great to hear that you're doing that.
Absolutely. And just, because I think maybe I didn't explain, I talked a lot about belonging. There's 3, let's say, foundational pillars that we talk about when we talk about inclusion, diversity at Siemens Energy. One is belonging. So it's that sense, the culture, you with the skill and the will, anybody and everybody should be here and should be respected and should be heard, etc. Equality, I think that goes without saying, and the society and partnerships, Neil. And I think this is where you're absolutely right. It's this external lens as well, and how do we impact the communities in which we are present? In over 90 countries, we're in a lot of communities. How do we work with those partnerships externally, which we have formed over years, and how do we continue to work with them to ensure that we have, let's say, all resources available that we learn as well. And I think that humbleness in our program is also what I was trying to work on, because we should be learning from others. And that's why what you're doing here in this chat is so great, that you're able to amplify some of the things that are happening, and being able to discuss this in this forum is fabulous. So thanks for that.
Well, thank you. And we learn something new every week. So when we started, there was not much in the way of learning material. So how do you learn? Well, you have conversations with people. So it's been great having a conversation with you today. We really look forward to having the Q&A on Twitter. That's going to be great fun. I'm sure you'll be fab. I need to thank the people that help us keep the lights on. No pun intended. Or maybe. So Barclays Access, MyClearText, and Microlink for supporting us and keeping us going over these 7 years. So thank you very much, Maria. It's been a real pleasure having you on Access Chat.
Thank you very much. Take care. Stay healthy, everyone. Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Antonio.